Sarah had always loved her house at the end of Willow Lane. Nestled quietly in the corner of Maplewood, it felt like a world apart from the noisy suburban streets and the endless traffic. The house was small but cozy, with a garden full of flowers that swayed gently in the summer breeze. Her favorite part, however, was the backyard gate. Beyond it lay a hidden path to Lake Sterling, a serene little lake most people didn't even know existed. It was her secret escape, a place where the stress of everyday life melted away. Every evening, Sarah would sit on her porch, sipping a cup of tea, watching the sun dip behind the trees. She loved the soft rustle of leaves, the distant calls of birds, and the way the water reflected the fiery sunset. Here, in this quiet corner, she felt free. It was her sanctuary, the one place in the world where no one could dictate what she did or how she lived. But one Monday morning, that peace was shattered by an email from the Homeowners Association, the HOA. The subject line was simple: immediate action required. Sarah clicked, expecting perhaps a routine notice or friendly reminder. Instead, her heart sank. The message was short, blunt, and cold. Residents must provide keys to private gates for community access. Immediate compliance required. Her chest tightened as she read the words over and over. They wanted her gate key. They claimed it was for community convenience, to let people reach the lake faster. But to Sarah, it felt like an invasion, a violation of the one place where she felt safe. This wasn't just a gate. It was the line between her private world and the outside. And now, strangers, some HOA officials, some neighbors, wanted to walk through it as if it was theirs. She stared at the email, incredulous. She had spent years building her little sanctuary, making it beautiful, safe, and peaceful. She had chosen this home for its quiet seclusion, not for its access to a lake that anyone could reach if they followed the proper paths. Giving them the keys felt like surrender, a betrayal of herself, of her home, and of her sanctuary. For a long moment, she considered ignoring it. Perhaps if she didn't respond, they would forget, move on, and leave her alone. But she knew better. The HOA never left things alone. They were persistent, and they loved bureaucracy more than boundaries. If she didn't act, she would lose not just control over her property, but her sense of safety. Sarah walked slowly to the gate, trailing her fingers along the cold metal. She felt a lump in her throat as she looked at the sturdy lock that had protected her for so long. This gate had witnessed countless quiet mornings, summer afternoons by the lake, and evenings where she poured her heart into her journal. It had been her companion in solitude, and now, strangers wanted to open it without her permission. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves around the yard. Sarah felt a surge of emotion, anger, fear, and sadness, all mixed together. How could they not understand that this gate meant more than convenience? How could they think her privacy was negotiable? Her mind raced through possible options. Could she call the HOA and refuse politely? Could she stand her ground legally? Could she find allies to support her? Every choice seemed daunting, but one thing was clear. She could not, would not, hand over her keys. As the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across her garden, Sarah made a silent promise to herself. No matter what the HOA tried, she would protect her sanctuary. She would protect her gate. She would protect her peace. And if they wanted a confrontation, she was ready to face it. For the first time in days, she felt a strange mixture of fear and determination. Fear because she didn't know how far the HOA would go. Determination because she finally realized she was not powerless. This gate was not just metal and wood. It was her home, her sanctuary, and her right. And she would fight for it. 2 days after receiving the email, Sarah was tending her garden when she heard a firm knock on her front door. Her heart skipped a beat. Visitors at this hour were unusual. She wiped her hands on her apron and cautiously approached. Peering through the peephole, her stomach sank. There stood Harold, the HOA president, flanked by 2 other committee members. Their expressions were calm, but there was an unmistakable air of authority, and menace about them. Sarah's palms felt sweaty and her heart pounded. She took a deep breath and opened the door, keeping her voice steady. "Good morning," she said, forcing a polite tone. "Sarah," Harold began, voice smooth and practiced, "we just need your gate key. It's for the community. Everyone will benefit. It's simple, really." Sarah's eyes narrowed. She could feel the anger rising like a hot current in her chest. "No," she said firmly. "This is my private property. You have no right to my keys. My gate stays closed unless I choose otherwise." Harold's smile faltered for a brief second, but he quickly covered it with a more insistent tone. "Sarah, don't make this difficult. It's a small thing. Just the key. You don't have to make a fuss. Everyone's asking for access. Don't you want to be a good neighbor?" Sarah felt her jaw tighten. Being a good neighbor didn't mean giving away her sense of safety. Being a good neighbor doesn't mean giving strangers access to my private property. I built this space for peace, not convenience for others. You'll have to find another way to reach the lake. The other two committee members exchanged impatient glances. One of them, a younger man with a clipboard, said, "Sarah, we're only asking because it's for the community. We're not trying to upset you, it's just easier for everyone this way." Sarah took a step back, her voice stronger now, fueled by a mixture of fear and anger. "I'm sorry, but it's not easier for me. You're asking me to compromise my safety and privacy. That is not acceptable. You can't just assume access because it's convenient for you." Harold's eyes hardened. He leaned slightly closer as if proximity could intimidate her. "You're overreacting. This is just a key. You don't have to make this a war." Sarah felt a shiver run through her spine, but she stood tall. "This isn't overreaction. This is boundaries. You want faster access? Build your own path. Leave my property alone. My gate is not yours, and it will stay locked unless I say otherwise." For a tense moment, no one spoke. The morning breeze seemed to hold its breath along with her. The committee members were clearly frustrated. Their calm, controlled demeanor cracked, replaced by impatience and a thin layer of irritation. Harold's lips pressed into a hard line. He finally straightened and said, "We'll be back. Think about your choice. It's easier if you cooperate. Don't make us force the issue." Sarah closed the door gently but firmly behind them. Her chest heaved. She leaned against it for a moment, trying to calm the storm inside her. Anger, fear, and determination swirled together. She knew they would not stop at a simple refusal. The HOA had power, money, and rules. But she also knew that this was her home, her sanctuary, and she would not give in without a fight. She walked to her backyard gate and ran her hands along the cool metal. The lock gleamed in the morning sun. Every scratch, every dent, every mark told a story of her time spent here, of the quiet moments she had cherished, and the sanctuary she had built. She would not surrender that as the committee members' car disappeared down the street. Sarah felt the weight of what was coming. The conflict had begun and she could sense the storm growing. But beneath the fear and tension, a flicker of courage burned. She would face this challenge head on. No, one would take her peace away from her, not the HOA, not Harold, not anyone. And with that, she promised herself one thing. She would protect her home, no matter what. The week after the confrontation, Sarah felt a constant tension in her chest. Every sound outside her house, the distant bark of a dog, the crunch of tires on gravel, even the soft whisper of wind through the trees made her jump. The HOA had not given up. If anything, their letters, emails, and notices had grown more aggressive, each one a small, sharp jab at her peace of mind. One morning, she opened the mailbox to find a thick envelope with a formal, stamped letter from the HOA. The words seemed to crawl across the page, cold and impersonal. "Failure to provide your gate key may result in fines, legal action, and property liens. Immediate compliance is required." Sarah dropped the letter into her bag, her hands trembling slightly. She felt like her sanctuary, her safe haven, was under siege. The thought of handing over the keys made her chest tighten. She had fought hard for this home, choosing it because it offered privacy and peace. Her backyard gate wasn't just a metal barrier, it was a boundary between her life and the world outside. Now the HOA was trying to strip that away, one notice at a time. The injustice of it gnawed at her, and yet a sense of fear lingered. What if they tried to force their way in? What if this small suburban authority had the power to disrupt her life entirely? She spent the evening walking around her property, touching the cold metal of her gate as she contemplated her options. She knew she couldn't give in, but she also realized that ignoring the threat was no longer enough. Each day, the letters became more pointed, implying consequences she wasn't ready to face. She needed help, but calling the HOA would do nothing. They were the problem. Finally, she sat down on the porch, feeling the weight of anxiety pressing on her shoulders. The sunset reflected on the surface of Lake Sterling in the distance, calm and unbothered. That lake had been her refuge, her escape, but now, even that, seemed threatened by the looming presence of the HOA. She clenched her fists, trying to summon the courage she had always felt when she walked along the quiet path to the water dot. Over the next few days, the tension only grew. More notices arrived, stapled to her door, or slid under it with no regard for her feelings. Some warned of escalating fines, others hinted at potential legal action. Each message carried the same implication: comply or face consequences. Sarah read them repeatedly, the words sinking deeper into her mind with every pass. She could feel her anger building, mingling with the fear and helplessness she had tried to ignore. She tried to imagine a way out. Could she stand her ground legally? Could she find allies, someone who would support her right to privacy? The questions were endless, and none of the answers were simple. Yet, despite the fear, a spark of determination began to grow. She realized she wasn't powerless. Her home was hers, her gate was hers. No law or letter could change that if she stood firm. That evening she walked to the lake path just beyond her gate, letting the soft evening light wash over her face. She breathed in the crisp air, listening to the gentle ripple of water, trying to calm her mind. The beauty of the lake reminded her why she was fighting. This wasn't just about a gate. It was about protecting her peace, her sense of control, her life. As she returned home, a new resolve settled over her. The HOA could threaten, intimidate, and send letters all they wanted, but she would not back down. She had already taken the first step. She had said no. Now she needed to prepare for whatever came next, knowing that the coming days would test her strength, her courage, and her determination to protect her sanctuary at all costs. And deep inside, beneath the fear and frustration, Sarah felt a quiet, steady pulse of power. She was ready. She had to be. The tension at Sarah's home had reached a peak. Every day brought a new letter, a new threat, a new attempt to unsettle her. The constant barrage left her feeling exhausted and anxious, and yet she refused to give in. She knew she needed support, someone who could help her navigate the growing storm. One evening, after another stack of notices arrived, Sarah picked up the phone and called the local police department. Her hands trembled as she dialed, a mix of fear and hope swirling in her chest. She explained the situation calmly but thoroughly, describing the HOA's repeated demands for her gate keys and the threatening letters she had received. The officer on the other end, Officer Martinez, listened quietly, without judgment or interruption. "Ma'am," he said finally, "you have every right to protect your property. No one can force their way onto your land without your permission. If they try, we'll respond immediately. You are within your rights." Sarah felt a small wave of relief wash over her. It wasn't that she doubted herself, she knew she was right, but hearing an authority confirm her rights, seeing that the law was on her side, gave her courage she hadn't felt in days. It was as if a weight she hadn't even realized she carried had been lifted. The following morning, Sarah went about her routine with a renewed sense of determination. She walked to her gate and ran her hands over the cold metal, imagining the days ahead. She would not let the HOA intimidate her. Not anymore. With Officer Martinez's words echoing in her mind, she felt an unexpected ally, someone who could stand with her if the confrontation escalated. For years, Sarah had thought she was alone in defending her home. The HOA had always been a faceless, distant authority, and she had imagined herself powerless. But now she realized that help could come from unexpected places. The law, the community, and people who understood boundaries could be her shield. She spent the next few days documenting everything. Every notice, every email, every interaction with the HOA was carefully logged. She even took photographs of her property, the gate, and the path to the lake. Each step made her feel more in control. No longer was she just a homeowner being pressured, she was a defender of her home, armed with evidence and support. Yet, beneath the newfound courage, a flicker of fear remained. She knew Harold and the committee would not stop easily. They had power and influence, and they might try to test her boundaries again. But now she felt ready to face them, prepared to stand her ground and willing to involve law enforcement if necessary. One evening, she sat on her porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees, and thought about the future. The lake shimmered, in the distance, peaceful and untouched, a reminder of why she was fighting. This wasn't just about a gate or convenience. It was about preserving her sanctuary, her right to privacy, and her peace of mind. Sarah realized something important that night. Courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was standing firm despite it. And though the battle with the HOA had only just begun, she felt a quiet, steady strength growing inside her. She was no longer simply reacting to threats. She was preparing, strategizing, and asserting her rights. With a final glance at her locked gate, she whispered to herself, "I won't give up. Not now, not ever." As the sky darkened, stars began to appear above Maplewood, tiny pinpricks of light shining through the night. In that quiet moment, Sarah felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. She had found an ally, and more importantly, she had found her own strength. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it head-on. The following week felt heavier than any Sarah had experienced. The HOA's persistence hadn't waned. If anything, it had intensified. Each day brought new letters, more demands, and subtle threats. Sarah knew they were testing her limits, trying to provoke a reaction, trying to make her give in. But she had made her decision. She would not yield. Her gate, her home, and her peace were not negotiable. On a sunny Wednesday morning, Sarah was in her kitchen, brewing coffee and listening to the birds, when she heard an insistent knock at the front door. Her heart skipped a beat, a mixture of fear and determination tightening her chest. She glanced through the peephole and froze. There they were, Harold and his 2 committee members, standing confidently, clipboards in hand, smiling with a sense of entitlement that made her blood boil. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. Today they would learn that her calm wasn't weakness. She opened the door, her voice firm. "Good morning, how can I help you?" Harold stepped forward, his smile smooth and practiced. "Sarah, we just need the key to your gate. It's for everyone's convenience. No one wants this to be difficult." Sarah felt her chest tighten, but she didn't flinch. "No," she said firmly. "I've told you before, my gate is private. You will not get a key. You can't force your way in. This ends now." One of the committee members tried to interject, speaking quickly and nervously. "Sarah, it's just for the lake. It's not personal. You don't have to—" "Not personal?" Sarah interrupted, her voice rising slightly. "Everything you've done has been personal. You've sent letters, threats, and notices, all to intimidate me into giving up my rights. You've crossed a line. I will not allow it." Harold's smirk faltered, replaced by a flicker of irritation. The younger committee member looked uneasy, shifting from foot to foot. Sarah could feel the tension thickening in the air, a silent battle of wills stretching across the porch. Before the confrontation could escalate further, a sudden sound of sirens pierced the morning air. Sarah's heart lifted. She had called the police days before explaining the situation, and now her call had arrived at the right time. Officer Martinez stepped out of a police car, followed by 2 other officers. "Sir," Officer Martinez said, voice calm but authoritative, "we've been called regarding potential unauthorized entry. Step back from the property." Harold's eyes widened in disbelief. He glanced at the other members, whose confident posture crumbled in an instant. They had assumed Sarah was alone, powerless, and intimidated. But now the reality hit them. She had allies, and the law was on her side. "This is ridiculous," Harold said, his voice trembling slightly, though he tried to hide it. "We're just trying to—" "Enough," Officer Martinez interrupted. "You've been warned. You cannot enter this property without permission, do you understand?" The committee members exchanged glances, panic flashing in their eyes. Their sense of authority, their imagined power had evaporated. The confrontation that they had thought would be simple, a mere annoyance, had turned into a humiliation. They muttered under their breath, glanced at each other, and finally retreated, clearly shaken. Sarah closed the door gently, her hands still, trembling, but her heart racing with triumph. The weeks of fear, anxiety, and tension melted into a sense of relief so strong it brought tears to her eyes. She leaned against the door, breathing deeply, feeling a mix of exhaustion and pride. She had stood her ground, she had not given in. And most importantly, she had protected her home. The morning sun fell on her garden, casting long shadows across the lawn, and for the first time in days, Sarah felt a deep sense of peace. She knew the battle wasn't over. There might be more letters, more attempts, but she had won this confrontation. She had shown that boundaries could not be ignored, that privacy mattered, and that courage could overcome intimidation. Sarah walked to her gate, ran her hands over the cool metal, and smiled softly. It was more than a gate. It was a symbol of strength, resilience, and the unwavering power to protect what mattered most. After the confrontation, Sarah felt a strange mix of exhaustion and relief. The adrenaline that had kept her tense for weeks slowly ebbed away, leaving her body weak, but her mind clear. She leaned against the front door, taking deep breaths as the morning sun warmed her face. The world outside seemed quieter now, softer, somehow, as if it too recognized that a battle had been fought and boundaries had been defended. She walked slowly to her backyard, feeling the familiar crunch of gravel under her feet. Her hands brushed the cold metal of the gate, the same gate that had been at the center of so much conflict. Now it felt like a shield, a silent protector that symbolized her courage, her determination, and her right to privacy. For weeks, she had carried fear, anger, and frustration in her chest. But in that moment, she felt something new. Triumph. Sitting on the porch, she stared at the lake in the distance, its surface glittering under the bright morning sun. The water, calm and serene, reflected the quiet beauty that had drawn her to this place in the first place. It had been threatened, but she had protected it, and in doing so, she had protected herself. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the release of tension she hadn't realized she was holding. For so long, Sarah had felt powerless. She had imagined the HOA as a faceless force, capable of taking what they wanted without consequence. But that perception had been shattered. She realized now that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was standing firm in spite of it. She had confronted her fears, faced intimidation, and refused to be bullied. In doing so, she had discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. The police officers, who had stood by her side during the confrontation, had become more than just authority figures. They had become symbols of justice and protection. Officer Martinez had been patient, understanding, and supportive, giving her the reassurance she needed to face the HOA's persistent threats. Sarah understood now that asking for help wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. Courage could be bolstered by allies, by people who respected boundaries and the law. As she sat quietly, listening to the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds, Sarah's mind wandered to the weeks of stress and sleepless nights. Every threatening letter, every demand for her gate keys, every intrusive visit had been an attempt to undermine her sense of safety. And yet, she had endured, she had stood firm, and she had won. A soft breeze carried the scent of flowers from her garden, and she closed her eyes, letting herself breathe fully for the first time in weeks. The fear that had once weighed so heavily on her chest had lifted, replaced by a sense of empowerment and self-respect. She felt proud, not in a boastful way, but in the quiet, deep satisfaction of knowing she had defended her home, her sanctuary, and herself. That evening, as the sun set over Lake Sterling, Sarah walked slowly along her private path, savoring the tranquility she had fought so hard to protect. She paused at the water's edge, letting the soft lapping of the lake soothe her spirit. In the reflection of the sun on the water, she saw not just herself, but a symbol of resilience. She had faced fear and intimidation, and she had emerged, stronger. Returning to her home, she felt a renewed sense of peace and confidence. The HOA had underestimated her. They had assumed she was weak or afraid. But now, she knew her strength, her courage, and her right to stand firm. Her home was hers, her gate was hers, and her sanctuary was safe. And in that quiet evening, Sarah understood something profound. Protecting what mattered most wasn't always easy, but it was always worth it. She had faced a storm, and now, finally, she could breathe freely, her spirit lighter and her heart unburdened. The days following the confrontation felt almost unreal to Sarah. The HOA had retreated, their threats and demands suddenly gone silent. The letters stopped arriving and the visits ceased. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe without that tight knot of fear pressing on her chest. She walked through her home and garden, noticing details she had overlooked during the storm of tension: sunlight dancing on her flower petals, the fresh scent of morning dew, the gentle sway of the trees in the breeze. Her sanctuary was intact. Yet, the victory felt deeper than just the silence of the HOA. Sarah had discovered something about herself that no letter or threat could ever take away: her courage. She had stood firm against intimidation, refused to compromise her safety and privacy, and had protected her home with unwavering resolve. That inner strength gave her a sense of empowerment she hadn't known before. It was not pride in the arrogance of winning. It was the quiet, steady satisfaction of knowing she had defended what was hers. Each evening, she would walk along the path to Lake Sterling, letting the water soothe her still tingling nerves. The lake had always been her refuge, but now it felt like a celebration of her perseverance. The sun reflected on the surface, painting the world in soft golds and oranges, and Sarah smiled, feeling a profound connection to the quiet beauty she had fought to protect. Every ripple in the water, every rustle of the trees, felt like a confirmation that her efforts had mattered. Her interactions with neighbors slowly returned to normal, and some who had previously assumed the HOA's demands were harmless now looked at her with respect. She had set a boundary, and the strength she showed reminded everyone that some things, privacy, safety, and peace, are non-negotiable. Sarah realized that boundaries were not just rules, they were the walls that protected what made her feel human, whole, and safe. One afternoon, she found herself sitting on her porch, cup of tea in hand, feeling the warmth of the sun on her face. She gazed at the gate, her hands lightly brushing the cold metal. The gate was no longer just a physical barrier, it was a symbol of her resilience, a testament to her courage, and a reminder that she could face challenges head-on. She thought of Harold and his committee, imagining the shock and humiliation they must have felt when their attempts to intimidate her failed. A small, satisfied smile crept across her face. The lake called to her, as it always had. She walked the familiar path, the soft gravel crunching under her feet. Each step felt lighter, freer. The air was filled with birdsong and the gentle lap of water, as if the world itself was breathing with her. She felt the lingering tension of the past weeks finally dissolve, replaced by calm and contentment. At that moment, Sarah realized that protecting her home had also protected her spirit. She had faced fear, uncertainty, and persistent pressure, and she had emerged stronger. Her sanctuary, both inside and out, was safe. She had not only defended her property, but had affirmed her right to stand firm, to refuse unjust demands, and to honor her peace above all else. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, the lake glimmered like liquid fire, reflecting the quiet triumph of the day. Sarah sat at the water's edge, breathing in deeply, feeling a sense of completion and closure. The storm had passed, her home was hers, her peace was hers, and most importantly, she knew that no one could take away the courage she had found within herself that night. As she closed the door behind her and locked the gate securely, Sarah felt a deep, abiding sense of safety and satisfaction. She had faced the threat head-on, called upon the law, and defended her home without compromise. Her sanctuary was restored, her confidence intact and her spirit unshaken. For Sarah, life had returned to its quiet rhythm, but now with something new, a profound understanding of her own strength. She had faced intimidation, stood her ground, and triumphed, not just over the HOA, but over the fear that had once threatened to control her. And in that victory, she found the lasting peace she had always deserved.